I don't know if anyone's on, and we'll have to make sure that after they get the file downloads, we'll have to send it out.
Yeah, I just put the link in there. Put everything.
Okay, wonderful. Very good.
You might have to let them in, though.
All right, I guess I'll see if they come in. We should have. There's no way to have it automated.
Yeah, there is, but I set it up the proper way.
Okay, so we'll have to do that after. Okay. Today's daf is daf Gimel. We're holding on daf Beis and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. B. We're on page 2. B. 4 is my guess. Okay. So what does it say over here? So yesterday we finished the daf. We talked about the distance between. We were talking about the halacha of the walled cities that they read on the 15th. What if you have a city that is the outskirts of the walled city? Does it also read on the 15th or not? So it said over there that as if it's close to the city, it's got to be within a mil. And the Gemara brought a statement, and it's important who said it. That distance, which is a distance of a mil, was said by either Rabbi Yirmiyah, and there are those that say maybe it was stated by Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So apparently, there was a group of statements that were said by either by Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Chia bar Abba, and we didn't know who it was. The Gemara is now going to bring a series of 3 or 4 statements that were relevant to really nothing. It's a tangent, but it's the fact that they were stated by either Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So that's the continuation of the Gemara. Rabbi Yirmiyah v'isem Rabbi Chia bar Abba menatzpach mem nun tzadi pei chav. What's special about Mem Nun Tzadi Pei Chav? If you take a look at it, these are depending upon if you went to a Hebrew academy or you went to a Yeshiva Shecheder, you either refer to them as the endomems or the Mem Sofis or Mem Sofit. Yeah, right? So the Menatzbach, these are the letters that really, the better way to say it is, there are 2 versions of these letters. All other letters have only one version, whereas these letters have what we call the endomem, and we'll just use mem as the example, or the middle of the word, beginning of the word mem. Now, what is the difference in surah of the letter? Well, obviously, the endomem, for the simplicity's sake, is a complete circle or a complete square, whereas the regular mem has an opening in it on the bottom left that you can get up into the mem. So, menatzbach zokt Rabbi Yirmiyah, and there are those who say Rabbi Chia bar Abba menatzbach tzufim omrum. These were said by the tzufim. Who were the tzufim? Rashi says these were the neviim, meaning this was said by prophets. Meaning this seems to say as if it was not on Har Sinai when we were given the Torah, that the Torah was written with 2 mems and 2 nuns and so on and so on. Rather, there was only one of them. And we're going to assume in the beginning of the Gemara here that what we call the regular mem was there and the end of mem wasn't. And comes along these Amiras, and they're coming to tell us that was Nischadish, that was taught to us later by the Nevi'im.
And it's like a little drasha, min sofai.
Yes, correct, yes. They say min sofai, which is maybe one of the answers as to why it's in the order that it is, despite the fact that it's not in the order of the Aleph Beis. Although there are others who say that Menatzbach is in the order. These were not all necessarily taught by the same Navi in one shot, but rather they were taught in the order that they were taught. And first one was the Mem, then there was the Nun, then was the Tzadi.
And why we say Tzofim, which we never say,
correct.
As opposed to Nevi'im.
Correct. That's a good point as well. It's a very good premise. He brings that on the side? No, that's your own. All right, we got to write that down. That's not bad. I like that.
He might bring it up.
Oh, yeah, it could be.
I don't have time to read the bottom.
Yeah, at a certain point, we start to be mechavan to the. Yeah, okay. The Sofim Amr. So this is a question, meaning there's about to be a question. How can you tell me that a davar that is Nischadish by Nevi'im about something that was given over in the Torah? V'tizbara, is that possible to say? We have 2 questions as follows. First question is, the pasuk says, "V'haksiv Eila ha-mitzvahs," and you should read the pasuk all the way through. Eila ha-mitzvahs asher tziva Hashem es Moshe el bnei Yisrael bar Sinai. The following are the mitzvahs. Eila is a language. Eila means these and not those, meaning it's a lashon miyat. It's a exclusionary word that tells us only these are the mitzvahs. And what does that teach us? She'ein navi rishoy l'chadish davar me'ata. That a Navi has no right, has no authority to be Mechadish a halacha that wasn't given over on Har Sinai. A Navi's job is to give Musar from Hashem. A Navi's job is not to be Mechadish halachas. Even when we're Medayek, Psukim, and Nevi'im, it does not mean that the Navi was Mechadish the halacha, but rather that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has put into the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim Ramazim and hints and Psukim that we can darshan. But it wasn't the Navi himself who was Mechadish the halacha. So how can you tell me Rabbi Chia bar Abba or Rabbi Yirmiyah that Menatzbach were said by the Tzufim? That can't be. And again, it's an important halacha. It's not just simply a statement of fact, because obviously, depending upon whether there is an endemem or there isn't an endemem, if you write a Sefer Torah, it's either going to be kosher or it's going to be puzzle. It's a very halachic nafkamina. The O, then a separate question, which to me is a little bit more of a starker question just in terms of mitzias. Everyone knows that the luchos were given over in a miraculous fashion. Certainly this is true for the luchos rishonos, that the letters were somehow suspended miraculously inside the stone of the luchos. Now, the nace really would only be relevant if the letter had a complete circle or a complete square, where then the donut hole in the middle would just be sort of suspended there with nothing to support it. Whereas if there was no endemem, and all we're talking about is the mem, well, the mem has a little piece connected to it. There's no real big miracle there. Now, obviously, the samach, there's no question from, because no one's arguing about the samach. The samach is a regular letter. There's no end of samach. So therefore, obviously, what we mean to say over here in this question is, you see that when Rav Chizda mentioned this, he mentioned both the mem and the samach together. And the assumption, of course, is that what he meant was both, the samach and the end of mem. So how can you tell me that Nevi'im or Mechadash only later the concept of an endemem when clearly it existed on Har Sinai? Now, there's an answer to this question that the Gemara doesn't want to say because it wouldn't answer both questions. You could simply say that when Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Chia said Menatzbach Tzofam Amrum, who says Menatzbach was referring to the endas? Maybe it was referring to what we call the regular letters. And on Har Sinai, you had the endemem. So the endemem you had, it was a square.
Well, yeah, the other letters in it.
Where you're asking from the Sefer Torah that we know. The statement was just simply menatzbach. In fact, in the Gemara, the mem and the nun and the tzadi and the pei are written. I mean, who knows which one it's referring to? So the Gemara could have answered that menatzbach is referring to the regular letters. The endas were already existent on Har Sinai, and the kashim of Rav Chizda would fall away. But Lamais the Gemara didn't want to answer that because it would only answer one of the questions. We'd still be left with the first question, which is, okay, Mali, we're talking about the endas, Mali, we're talking about the middle letters. Regardless, how can you tell me the Nevi'im or Mechadash, any one of these halachas? So the question would exist either way, so therefore the Gemara didn't want to give that teretz, but that's a potential answer the Gemara could have said. So what does the Gemara answer? Gemara says, in Mahava Hava. No, you're right. Of course, the endas and the regular letters, both the end letters and the middle letters, Hava, we had them. And that was by Har Sinai. And that's not a shayla. No Nevi'im or Mechadash, that there's a new way to write a new letter. Chas v'sholom. V'lo yahavi yada. Instead, what was the pshat that the Nevi'im or Mechadash? What did they tell us? V'lo yahavi yadi hey be'emtza teva v'hey b'seif teva v'asu tzoifim v'tkinan p'suchin be'emtza teva u'p'stumin b'sof teva. And came along the Nevi'im and told us that what we call the endemem is an endemem, and what's not an endemem is not an endemem. But we didn't know which one was which. So it was on Har Sinai that we had a samach for sure. We had a mem sofis or an endemem. What we call an endemem wasn't called an endemem. It wasn't told to us at that point, meaning it could be used interchangeably. And l'chura, what it's really answering is that in terms of the question about how could the Nevi'im be mechadash halacha, right? So this shita, and the answer here is holding that that's not called being mechadash halacha. If the Torah was given over with two mems and two nuns and two tzadis, v'chulu v'chulu, we were given the liberty to choose. You could put an endemem at the end, you could put an endemem in the middle, and it would both be kosher. Meaning, there's no chiddush in halacha, really. There is a chiddush by the Nevi'im in the sense that they were almost like metakin, that l'olam it's going to be the mem on the end, and the mem in the middle is going to be the way it's going to be. Yeah. But the answer of the Gemara here holds that that's not called a chiddush in halacha. That would be a problem of Eilah HaMitzvahs. And certainly it answers the question from Chizda. However, the Gemara now asks, sof, Eilah HaMitzvahs, meaning the maksha here, the person asking holds that this answer is not sufficient. The answer is simply telling me that we didn't know which one went in the middle and which one went in the end, and came along the Nevi'im and told us which one was which, is still being mechadash something, because what are they effectively doing? They're effectively telling you that if you stick an endemem inside the middle of the word, the Sefer Torah is going to be puzzle. So is that not being mechadash halacha? The Gemara says, right? So Eilah HaMitzvah she'ein navi asid l'chadash davar me'ata. The Gemara says, Ela shakchum v'chazru b'yostim, which is a little bit of a complicated teretz in Mitzias. Because what does it mean? That means HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah. Inside the Torah, just to take the mem meant that it had the mem and the end of the mem, right? That means it was written in the luchos. It was written in the Torah, right? And then we were obviously laning, and we were obviously reading the Torah. We had mezuzahs, we had tefillin. So that means they had these things. What did they forget? All you got to do is walk to your door, look at mezuzah, open it up, read it inside. Was the mem in the middle? Was the mem on the end? Which one was it? So this is a big question that we shouldn't deal with. It's a complicated question. There's a ritzvah, there's a radvaz, there's many Rishonim that discuss it. I'm going to tell you my understanding of the basic understanding of how to answer the question in order to make it simple to understand our Gemara. What does it mean that they forgot and then they came along later and the Nevi'im fixed it? Based on a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says there's two types of ksav. There's many types of ksav. There's something called ksav ashuris. this is what we know inside the Sefer Torah. When you go get an Aliyah, you look in the Sefer Torah, you can barely make out it unless you're a Balkairite. That's called Ksav Ashuris. Then there's something called Ksav Ivri. If you looked at Ksav Ivri, you'd think you're looking at Phoenician hieroglyphics, right? But the idea basically is they were a graphical representation of the letters, a lot easier to write, did not require nearly as many complicated tagim on the top of the letters and stuff like this. And this was an accepted way for us to write Sifrei Torah. And what the Ritzvah explains is that on Har Sinai, the Torah was given Ksav Ashuris, but that Ksav Ashuris was too high on a madrega, let's say, to be able to be left. And so therefore they started writing all the other Sifrei Torah with Ksav Ivris, which did not look at all like the way our Ksav looks. And therefore they did that for many generations until Ezra HaSofer came along and sort of brought back the concept of Ksav Ashuris and was mechadash it. And that's what it means, that the Tzufim were metakin it later. So what it means is they forgot it. It doesn't mean that they forgot it. What it means is for so many generations, we were writing with the other Ksav, and only now Ezra came along and brought it back. But since he brought it back, we didn't know. Did this mem go in the beginning? Did this mem go in the end? Therefore, Ezra came back and explained to us what it was.
That's shot in the Gemara. They found one Sefer Torah.
Exactly, right, exactly. I mean, they do ask kashas over here. Lamaisi, you had to say for Torah in the Aron. So why couldn't they check the Aron? So then they say maybe it was going. Taisus over here says it's going after. It was Nignas by Yeshio Melech, I think. There's another kasha they asked from the Urim V'Tumim. Lamaisa, the Urim V'Tumim had letters on it, and you had Sefer Tevis and you had endas and regular. So they ask a lot of kashas. It's a complicated Gemara. But unless it looks like you have a question, because I can tell from the pursing of your lips.
You're smart. I was going to say that in Ksav Ivri, the ayin is the circle.
Very good. Yismach, yeah, and Echanami, right. L'chura, Rav Chizda's statement clearly has to be talking about Ksav Ashuri, because if you look at Ksav Ivri, there's actually no endemem that looks the way we think of an endemem. It's actually a very open letter, whereas the ayin is written sort of like a zero turned on its side. It almost looks like a oval, like an egg lying on its side. So it could be that if there are shittas in the Lamaisa, the Gemara just bring the machlekes. There are other opinions who hold that even the Torah, when it was given in Ksav Ivri, which just goes to show you that it can get complicated, in which case then there must be sort of a corresponding alternate universe where the miracle there would be the ayin, not the mem and the
and that's the pashtus in a way, because why do we call it Ksav Ashuris? Because we got it
later. Exactly. Okay. Continues the Gemara with another statement of Rav Yirmiyah and V'isem Rav Chia bar Abba. Targum shel Torah, what we call Targum Unkelos. What we when you do Shnai Mikra Targum shel Torah, Unkelos Hager Amr. Who was Unkelos? Unkelos was a guy who was Megayer. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, and he was the one who gave us what we call Targum Unkelos, and it's called on his name. Yeah, Unkelos Hager Amr Mipi Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua. Targum shel Neviim, whereas the Targum that we have on Neviim,
Converted?
Yes, he was a ger, converted. Just goes to show you can start from anywhere in this Judaism business. There's no heights you can't reach. You can learn to be a Talmud of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Unbelievable. Targum shel Neviim. Who said that? Who put together the Targum of Nevi'im? That was Yonasan ben Uziel, Amru Mipi, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, which is a little bit difficult in historical reality. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi were from the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash, which would have been around 350 before the Common Era or so. And obviously, if Unkelos is a Talmud of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, that is a second or maybe third generation Tana from Hillel and Shammai, which would be talking about very, very close to the end of the second bias. You'd be talking maybe 200-300 years, maybe more than that difference. So it does not mean that Unkelos heard directly from Chagai Zechariah Malachi.
This is Yonasan ben Uziel.
Sorry, I meant Yonasan ben Uziel, who was a Talmud, of Hillel.
Okay.
Correct, thank you very much. Who's a Talmud of Yonasan ben Uziel, Yonasan ben Uziel is a Talmud of Hillel, and Hillel himself was from the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, which would have been about 300 years from the times of Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So it just means Pashas that he had a Messiah that way. But again, the point is, Unkelos did the Targum on the Chumash, Yonasan ben Uziel did the Targum on the Nevi'im, not the Tzufim, we'll see in a minute. V'nizdazea Eretz Yisrael, arba meos parsa, arbos meos parsa, that the entire Eretz Yisrael shook, the ground shook, when he was Mitargim Nevi'im. Yotza Basko, a great voice came out, V'omra and said, Mihu zeh, has a little bit already inklings of the Megilla, right? Mihu zeh vezu, right? Shagila Sisrai libnei Adam. Who was this person who was Megala, the secrets to my children? Ahmad Yonasan ben Uziel al Raglov, unbelievable to be Yonasan ben Uziel, right? Meaning, this was the greatest of the Talmidim of Hillel. This is Gemara and Sukkah, famous Gemara. says that when he would learn, the birds would fly over him, and the fire of his Torah would burn them up. So this guy is having supernatural things occur all the time. Not only is he burning up birds when he's learning Torah, he's having the earth shakes whenever he's being mechadash things. Not only that, baskels come to him. It's one thing to have a baskel; it's another thing to respond to the baskel. I mean, just think about it. Imagine a baskel came out. I'm pretty sure anyone in this room heard a baskel. We would think maybe let's go get an appointment with a therapist. Yeah, right. But if Yonis ben Uziel, he hears a baskel, what comes out? If Yonis ben Uziel says, "Who? Me? I was the one who did it. I was the one who made the targum." Yeah. So this is what happened. I'm the one who revealed these hidden secrets. It is known to you, Hashem. I did not do it for my own covet. I didn't do it for my father. Not that there's anything wrong with doing it for your father, but I didn't do it for those reasons. How did I do it? I did do it for my father. Ella for you, my father. I was metargim this in order so that what leman hashalom. People were having very, very strong arguments about exactly how to understand the psukim in Nevi'im. Nevi'im do not have as simple of a read as we all know when you open up a Nach, not necessarily Hoshua maybe, but as you go sort of deeper into Malachim and Shoftim, and certainly as you go into the later Nevi'im, it becomes very difficult sometimes to understand Psukim. There were a lot of arguments about how to understand the Psukim, so I felt the need, Leman Hashem, Leman HaMachlekes, to make sure that there's no Machlekes and Klal Yisrael to be Metargem, those words. The Od Bikish, not only that, I wanted the Legalis Targum Shel Ksuvim, which would be even more of a revealing of secrets. Why? Because in Ksuvim we have Daniel. Daniel talks about the end of days. We're talking about the times of the Mashiach, which would give us potentially an inkling into understanding when Mashiach might come. And on that, Yosef Baskol v'amruloi dayecha. That's too much. You want to be Metargem Ksuvim, you can't do that. We can't have you explaining Daniel so clearly to the people. I mean, l'chora, why? Meaning, Lamaisa, we want to learn Torah. Why can't I have a Targum on Ksuvim? Right? I mean, it really would help. And the answer is, if on some level he was Metargum, I mean, it's a Pella. It means that on the one hand, he could have done that, and that would have told us when Mashiach would come.
Wow. Which
is a Pella. It's a Pella.
It's like Yaakov in Bikish.
Yeah, Bikish, Yaakov, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. It's Mamish, it's in Yana Diyoyim. And what Hashem said to him is, he says, no. Right? Meaning, you can't reveal these secrets. These secrets you can't reveal. Just a palatable thing. But the reason is because if I tell you exactly when you're going to die, people think they'd want to know. You wouldn't want to know. You wouldn't want to know exactly when you're going to die. It's going to ruin your life. Right. The fact that you don't know when something's going to happen, it could happen at any moment. The same way a person's suffering, when he doesn't know when the suffering is going to end, that's the hardest type of suffering. The greatest Yismach is living your life knowing, I don't know when it's going to end. You have to nutz ice every single second, every single minute to live properly, right? And even if you only have 5 minutes left, a person can be kaina loma b'basacha, so loz ben the yeah? Okay, so Lamaisa, a Baskol came out, said, I don't want you being metargem the ksuvim. My timer, why not? Mishum de Izbei Kates Mashiach, like I said. But Targum Shal Torah Unkelos Ageram. The Gemara asks a question of you. I understand. You're telling me the Targum was written by Unkelos. I have the Hamer of Ikabar Avin Amar of Chanan al Marav. We have a pasuk. My Dichsev Yikru b'Sefer Toiras Elokim Mefoirash. This was going by Ezra, right? Ezra, when he was reading the Torah, it said over there that he read from a Sefer Torah, Toiras Elokim Mefoirash, and it was explained very well. V'Soim Seichel, and a lot of wisdom was placed. V'Yavinu b'Mikra, and the Mikra was understood. And therefore, that was what happened when he read the Torah. The Gemara now darshans each one of the parts of this pasuk, and we're going to explain. And from there, we're going to see that the Targum clearly originated well before Onkelos. So how can you tell me Onkelos was the one who made it if we're going to see that even in the times of Ezra, it already existed? Let's see it inside. But
not the time of Ezra, in the time of... Oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay. But Yikru b'Sefer Torah Elokim. What does that mean? Zemikra. That's the actual words of the Torah that he was saying. Mefoirash. Zet Targum, and this is going to be the bomb on our Gemara. V'Soim Seichel, what's that? Elu HaPsukin, this is where each verse ends and starts. V'Avinu b'Mikra, Elu Piskei Tamim, these are the cantillation notes, the trup that allow us to know how to lane. And again, each one of these things are going to explain the Psukim. If I don't know where a comma goes, if I don't know where an asnachta goes, if I don't know where the end, the sof pasuk goes, it becomes very difficult to read, as oftentimes it becomes an issue when someone's laning without familiarity with the psukim. Most of the times we don't really tell them it's no big deal if he just sort of butchers it, as long as he's saying the words. But sometimes it actually chaps enough gemina. If they're stopping at the wrong point, you put the comma in the wrong place by Bereshis Bar Elokim, and that entire thing becomes a completely lopsided thing, as the 13 separate mistakes, not mistakes, 13 separate things that they did in the Septuagint. One of them was Bereshis bara Elokim. When they translated into Greek, they made sure they didn't want the Greeks to think that Chas v'Shalom, that there was a guy named Bereshis and he created the God. That's not true. So therefore, but you can mess it up.
Where did we learn all
We didn't learn it, but it was referenced sort of subtly in the idea that we're metargim. When you're metargim the Torah, it was by, help me out here in the historical. What year is Hadrian? No, that was Hadrian. No, that was Alexander. Right? It was Alexander. Yeah. Alexander asked. He wanted to have Philo the Chacham in that city in Alexandria. Whatever. It's my history is not that great. But
the 70 Chachamim.
It's a Sarbat right? I mean, it was three. Well, that was the 8th, but they say it was 3 dark days, 8, 9, and 10. The 10th day was also maybe perhaps an issue. But either way, continues the Gemara. The Amri La'ilu HaMesayris, there are those that say the way to understand V'yivinu b'mikra is not referring to the cantillation notes, but rather it's referring to the idea that in the Torah, not all words were written Malay. Sometimes Sukkos has a Vav, sometimes Sukkos doesn't have a Vav. And the Malay and the Chaser are referred to as Yesh Em LaMikra, Yesh Em LaMesayris, right? We know that sometimes we make drushas on how the words are written, and sometimes we make drushas on how our Mesorah tells us we're supposed to read it, right? And that Yesh Em LaMesayris can only come Balpeh, that's a Mesorah, and so therefore, when he meant over here, when it said V'yavinu b'mikra, that you understood the mikra, it meant what was written needed to be understood on a deeper level, meaning how to read it. But the point is, again, the question here is that you clearly see that from the times of Ezra there was already a targum. So how can you tell me that Onkelos is the one who was metargum? So Gemara answered, Enechanami, same tarot similar to before. This is a little bit of an easier one. Shakchum v'chazur v'yosnu, meaning Enechanami. There was a targum at that time. They weren't necessarily writing them down. Maybe the Messiah, they kept it. Eventually they forgot it. Onkelos came along and decided to put it together. And there's an interesting thing the Gemara is going to now ask is, okay, so 1 second. So Onkelos came along and made a targum on Torah, and Yomi ben Azil came along and made a targum on Nevi'im. And somehow the only one that got the earthquake was Yomi ben Azil. So ask the Gemara, Maishno deraisa deloy is dazo, v'adeniviyah as dazo. Why is it that when the Torah was nistargem, was translated, there was no big deal about it, but whereas the Nevi'im, it was a big deal. So more answers, no. Deraisa mifarsha milsa. Dinei Torah, the Chumash, it's pretty explicit, meaning yes, in Hanami there are Ramazim in it, and obviously there's tremendous amount of depth to it, but what's being stated there is being stated explicitly. There really aren't too many psukim outside of maybe Shiras Hazinu, where you're going to read it and really have no clue what's going on. Whereas the Nevi'e, ikimili de mifarshan, v'ikimili de misasman. There are those things that are hidden, and there are those things that are revealed. And this does not necessarily mean per se that we're talking about like the same idea we said by the Sod HaIbur. The Sod HaIbur was not necessarily like some deep Kabbalistic thing. It was just simply a complicated matter that on the surface was difficult to understand. So therefore, the reason why the earth quaked when the Nevi'im were translated was because there was a certain clarification of deeper or complicated ideas. So the question then becomes, so why is that such a big deal? Meaning, Lamaisa, Art Scroll helps, right? I mean, it helps to be able to have a clarification for what's going on. So there's a Taisus Rid over here that says, and it's a hard idea to hear nowadays because we're constantly battling between, is our responsibility to understand Torah or is our responsibility to be Amel in Torah? So the Taisus Rid says here that there was a quaking of the earth upon the translation of Nevi'im because it would only be before that Targum existed that those who learned Nevi'im had to really harv in learning. They had to really be Amel. And the beauty of Torah isn't just simply in knowing it. The beauty of Torah is in the process of getting to the depth of that knowledge, which requires a certain breaking of the teeth, and honestly, when you come to a pasuk and it's hard to understand, there's a special type of avoda in trying to break that down. Now comes along Yomi ben Azil and he says, no, it's okay. I'll give you a translation. It's like the art school on the other side of the Gemara. It's sometimes such a big taiva to just quickly look over before you crack your head a little bit on it. Not saying one shouldn't look. I look if I need it, but obviously, a person should try as much as possible to have a melus. That's what Taisus Rid says. Therefore, the earth quaked. Now, where's the pasuk that you see an example where if you just read it on its own without the targum, you might come to a conclusion that is completely opposite of the truth? Here's a pasuk. The pasuk says, it's a pasuk in Zechariah, again, one of the Nevi'im. Dichsiv, b'yoim hahu, we're talking about b'yoim hahu. There's a machlekes in the Gemara, b'yoim hahu, if it's referring to on the day of the shechita of the shechting of the Yetzer Hara, or if we're talking about the death of Mashiach ben Yosef. It's a Gemara in Sukkot, it's a Peltic Gemara. I'll explain it in a minute if we have time. What does it say? On that day, Yigadol HaMisped b'Yerushalayim, there will be a great eulogy, a great hesped in Yerushalayim, and it'll be like Kemisped HaDadrimoin b'Bikas Megidoin. It'll be like the hesped of the Dadrimoin, which sounds like it's the name of a person, b'Bikas Megidoin, and it was in the valley of Megiddo. Now, if you look through all of Tanakh, of course, I know all of Tanakh Baal Peh back and forth. I'm telling you right now, there's no such thing. There is no such thing as a hesped of a Dadrimoin in the Bikas Megiddo. So how does it make sense that in Zechariah, we're referencing a eulogy that happened somewhere else? Well, you want to know how big it's going to be? It's going to be like that other one that I have absolutely no clue about. That doesn't help. You're trying to tell me how big. So without the Targum, we would not have shot in this pasuk. The Amr of Yosef was one of the Amoras, was known to be a tremendous Bucky in Targum. He was an expert in Targum. He said, that's the power of this statement, is even he said, Ilmali Terguma, without the Targum, meaning the Targum Yonasan, the Haikra, Lo Yadana Maikam, I'd have no clue what's pshat in pasuk. Meaning, and he explains, what's the Targum? Biyuma, Biyoimahu, on that day, Yazgi Mispeda Yerushalayim, there will be a hesped in Yerushalayim, Kemispeda the Achav Bar Imri. It'll be like the hesped of Achav. It's not even in the pasuk. It's like the hesped of Achav Arosha, the Kotel Yossi Hadriman ben Tavriman, who was killed by Hadriman ben Tavriman, the Ramos Gilad, in a place, again, not mentioned in the pasuk, in Ramos Gilad. Kemispeda the Yoshia Bar Aman, like Melech Yoshio was a big tzaddik. The Kotel Yossi Paroi Chagira, and he was killed by Paroi Bebikas Megiddo. Unbelievable. The pasuk says it's like this fantasy eulogy said around someone that we don't even find. How does the Targum explain it? There are two separate deaths, two separate eulogies. One happened to A, the other one happened to B. One's talking about a Rasha Achav, the other one's talking about a big tzaddik Yeshua Melech. So the Gemara over there that I referenced, that Bayoma, who was talking about the killing of the Yitzhara or the killing of Mashiach ben Yosef, the Vilna Gaon explains, beautiful idea. He says, what's going on here in our Gemara and really what's going on over there? The Gemara over there says what actually is going to happen on the day when the Yitzhara is shechted. It's going to have that the tzaddikim and the rishayim are going to come and they're both going to cry. Why are they both going to cry? The tzaddikim are going to come and cry. They're going to the rishayim are going to come and cry, and they're going to see which one comes first. I think the tzaddikim. Tzaddikim come first. They're going to see a big mountain, and they're going to cry over the avodah that they had to put into beating this mountain of the Yitzhara and how great it was. How did we accomplish such a great thing? And the rishayim are going to come and cry, and they're going to see like a little hair and milk, and it's going to look like how did we not beat this Yitzhara? It would have been so easy for us to pull the hair out. They're both going to cry. The Gaon says that our Gemara over here by Yaimahu, these two Hespedim are going for both of them. One was a Rasha and one was a Tzaddik, and it's referencing by Yaimahu the idea that it was the Yitzhara that was shechted. You're going to have Rishayim that are going to be crying. They're going to be crying. Who are crying? The ones who are crying by Achav. Which ones are the Tzaddikim that are going to be crying? They're going to ones who are going to be crying by Yoshio Melech, who was a Tzaddik. And therefore he says that's exactly what's shot in our Gemara as to why both of them are going to be referenced only in one pasuk. But l'chura, what do you see from here? You see the Targum Yonasan, which was said in Nevi'im, was clarifying psukim that we would not have had without it, and therefore that's why the earth quaked. Okay, that's the end of the statements of Rav Yirmiyah of Isim Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Continues the Gemara, another pasuk. It says, actually no, I think there's one more Rabbi Yirmiyah. Re'isi ani Daniel levadi. This is a pasuk in Daniel. Daniel says, and I saw on my own, meaning I saw it, no one else saw it, es hamara, the vision, veha anoshim, asher hayu imi, and the men that were with me, loy ro es hamara, they did not see the vision. Aval charda gdoila nafla aleim, but they did get very scared, v'yivrchu behechba, and they ran away. This is a pasuk. So ask the Gemara, man nihu anoshim, who are these people that he's referencing that did not see what he saw? Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, I'm sorry, here's the another example of where those two Amoraim said it. Zeh Chagai Zchariu Malachi. The people that were with him were Chagai Zchariu Malachi with the Seif Nevi'im, and Daniel was saying, I saw the vision, they did not see the vision. However, even though, despite the fact that they did not see the vision, they ran away in hiding out of fear, and I guess the vision must have been a scary vision. Inhu Adifa Mine, and it's stated over here, they are greater than him, meaning they are greater than Daniel. However, V'ihu Daniel Adif Minai are also greater than them. How does that work? Inhu Adif Mine, he's greater than them. The Inhu Nevi'i, the Ihu Lav Navi. He's not a Navi, which is not so pashut. Daniel Bepashtus was a Navi. He had a Mara. What it means here is that Daniel was different than the other Nevi'im, and that Daniel was not provided with visions as a shlichus from Hashem to say it over. But he did see things.
Which is why Al Pashtus was put in Ksubim rather than
correct. Right. Even though he was a Navi, what he was telling us was not necessarily being told to him in order to tell it to all of Klal Yisrael. Correct. V'ihu lav Navi. However, ihu adif minayu the chaza v'inu loy chaza. Because obviously in this scenario they didn't see this vision. And again, it's hard to say that one's better than the other. It's just a different type of vision. This clearly was not a vision meant for Klal Yisrael. So therefore, Zechariah, Malachi, Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah didn't see it because it wasn't something that Hashem needed to tell them. Whereas Daniel did see these visions, so therefore he saw it. So he was greater than them for that reason. Asked the Gemara, if they didn't see this vision, why did they get scared and therefore run away? He says, because even though they didn't see it, it's like that creepy crawly feeling you get when someone's looking at you and you don't know if they're looking at you, or you feel there's someone in the room and there's no one in the room. Your mazel, your malach that watches over you, that malach saw, and they had the hergish from that malach, and therefore they were scared, they ran away. From here you see that anyone who gets scared, even though there's no real reason to get scared, it's not necessarily in your head. A person can be scared, and it's the mazel that's making him feel that way. If a person has such a fear and he can't really explain it, how does he fix the situation? Likri kriyashma, be makabel upon yourself almost for that there's a power in the pasuk. I remember I heard this, that if you look at the Shema itself, the Shema starts with a shin, it ends with a dalet. It's the shin dalet. So I think the Balaturim says the thing that the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad has the power to push away the shin dalet, the shadim of the world, the demons. V'i koyim b'mokim atinoivus. What if you're in a bad place where you cannot let it say Kriyashma, the dirty, disgusting place? It says over here, linshoif meduchte arba garmidi. Jump out of that area, Dalet Amis, not just simply so that you can now be in a clean place, but they also say maybe by jumping Dalet Amis, really the Shin Dalet has the ability to shepherd you only in that spot where you are. But if you can change your makom, then maybe he doesn't have the ability to bother you. And so by changing from Dalet Amis is always the amount of space a person needs to move to have a new makom, a new place. Either way, V'i loy, and if let's say you can't or you didn't, you should at least state out loud. This is what you should say. Have these words on your lips if you're ever scared. Iza de beitavchi shmeina minoi. There are fatter goats than me, meaning don't bother me. Go find the fat, meaning don't shepherd me. It's a way of, again, I'm sure the Ben Yoyod over here goes to town on exactly why it's an A as a goat. I mean, goats are not necessarily so fat. Why not say a sheep? Sheep are generally pretty, zaftig, right? So I don't know why they chose a goat here, but there must be some deeper ideas here. This is not for me to explain because I'm not allowed to. The Kabbalist told me I'm not allowed to give it over in public, so I can't tell you all about the deep ideas here. But maybe after the recording, we could all sit down and see the fire shoot up to the sky. Okay.
I'm going to write this down.
Okay. Don't worry, I'm going to make it disappear. Let's go back to the Gemara. So what did we say yesterday? We said there was a pasuk, me'ir le'ir, right? It said we had various different drushes. In fact, we started saying that from those drushes, we understood this idea that the cities that are on the outskirts of the walled cities, those cities would lay in Megillah on the same day as the walled cities. So once you're telling me that the double lashon in the Megillah has a opportunity for a drusha, how do we understand Medina LaMedina? V'ir LaDrusha, mishpacha l'mayasa. So then it says later in the psukim, mishpacha. What's that coming to teach me? Zakti Gemara, I'll tell you. Very simple. It's coming to teach that the Kohanim and the Leviim, they're mevatel the avodah to do Mikra Megillah, which is a big chiddush. Now, just to give some context, what we're going to take from here to the end of the daf is pretty much just going to be one long conversation about what mitzvah is docha, another mitzvah specifically as it pertains to Megillah. So just outside going to say we're going to discuss 4 mitzvos, right? Really 3, right? We're going to be discussing Torah and Avoda, really 4. Torah and Avoda as it compares to Megillah, and Torah and Avoda as it compares to Mace Mitzvah. Mace Mitzvah, anyone want to show their hand up? What's a Mace Mitzvah? Anyone? Mace Mitzvah. Mace Mitzvah basically means?
Something for the dead.
Boom. Mace Mitzvah specifically, though, does not only mean that there's someone that their body needs to be buried. It means that if you wouldn't do it, the body would just sit there. So and therefore you would only be able to get to it after you're done with the mitzvah. And the issue is a kavod habrius issue of leaving the body. No relatives available to do it. Now there's also halacha that if a person has others to handle the mace, but it's your relative, then there's a special chiyuv that despite the fact that there are others who have it, you have a chiyuv to do it. However, that chiyuv does not rise to the same level as a mace mitzvah where no one else could do it. Because there's no kavod habrius issue there. It's really just a chiyuv that Hashem puts on you to handle your responsibilities with your family. Okay, with that hakdama, let's read it inside. So what did we just say? That from the pasuk of mishpacha, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chinana learns that mevatel avodas hakarbon in order to do Megillah. We don't say that. What do you mean? We're kohanim or leviim. We're being osek in such important things. We don't have to go hear Megillah, but adorabu, they do. The Amar review, the Amar Rav, kohanim beavodasim, the leviim beduchnon, b'Yisrael be'ma'amadan. The kohanim with their avodah of the carbon, the leviim when they're standing on the porch, they're singing. B'Yisrael be'ma'amadan, which we would need a whole big explanation for had we not learned Masechet Taanis. But we're just going to skip right over it because we know it. Kulan mevatlin avodasan. Everyone is mevatel the avodah. Ubayan lishmaya mikra Megillah. Tanya nam yachi a brisa like this. Kehanim beavodasan levim beduchnon b'Yisrael be'amadan. Kulan mevatlin avodasan. Ubayan lishmaya mikra Megillah. So what do you see from here? That avodah is nisbatel mipnei Megillah, meaning if they have to choose between hearing Megillah, the kohen cleans his hands, puts the knife away, puts the blood away, goes to shul, and here's Megillah. Now, mikan samchu shel beis Rebbe. Those chachamim of the beis medrash of Rebbe, they therefore took this halacha and extrapolated from it another halacha. Shemevatlan Talmud Torah uboyin lishmaya mikra Megillah. And how do I know that you're mevatel Talmud Torah in order to go and hear Megillah? Kal v'chaymer me'avodah. It's a kal v'chaymer. Umada chuma avodah shehi chamura. Avodah meaning karbanos, which is very strict, very stringent. Mevatlinan, we say don't do it. Rather, go hear Megillah, Talmud Torah, like Kol Shekain. Would it not be then a Talmud Torah, a Kal V'chaymer, the Talmud Torah, you should certainly be Mevatel? Ask the Gemara, whoa, 1 second. What did you just do? You just automatically assumed that Talmud Torah is weaker than Avodah, that I can make a Kal V'chaymer, that if I'm Mevatel Avodah, I can be Mevatel Talmud Torah. You've read the Gemara, the Avodah Chamur mi Talmud Torah, v'haksiv. And here's going to be a little bit of a 4 or 5 line explanation, so let me say it outside. What's going to happen over here is we're going to bring a pasuk from Yehoshua, when he was standing outside with his entire army about to attack Yericho, the first battle as we were entering in Eretz Yisrael. And over there, it says that, we'll see in a moment, he didn't bring the carbon from earlier because they were busy preparing for war. And then that night they were sitting encamped, waiting to battle tomorrow, waiting for Hashem to give them the tzivui to go in. And they weren't learning. And a Malach Hashem basically came by and said, hey, what are you doing? You should be learning Torah. And we're going to see from there that Iker came more over the Liman HaTorah that they were being Mevatel, and not necessarily so much for the fact that they were not bringing the Korban Tamid. And from there we learn that Talmud Torah is more important than Avodah, which is really ultimately the question here. How could you tell me there's a Kal V'chomer that I'm Mevatel Avodah, Karbonos for Megillah, therefore I certainly will be Mevatel Talmud Torah? It works the other way around. If anything, I might say you might have a chiyuv to not go hear the Megillah and still not be Mevatel Torah. That's high level what's about to happen. So let's just see it inside. The Haksiv Yihi b'Yos Yoshua Yerichai v'Yisa Eina v'Yar v'Hine Ish Oimed Lenegdai v'Yishtachvu L'Apav. It says over here that Yoshua saw a man outside the camp. It was at night, and he didn't know exactly what he was, but he said to him, Shalom Aleichem. He said hello. And not only that, he bowed down to him. Just parenthetically, before we explain the Gemara's question, the Gemara's bothered. How did Yoshua have the right to bow down to him? You're not supposed to say shalom to your friend. You had shalom to your friend at night. Why not? We're nervous that maybe he's a shade, meaning you can't see the guy's face. You don't know. Maybe he's a demon. It's unbelievable. Yeah? Maybe he's a demon, and maybe you're dealing with someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart. So you should not say shalom aleichem. Why? Because shalom is one of the names of God. And one of the names of God, you're not allowed to say that to a shindalit. So if you're not allowed to say shalom to a shindalit, then you're certainly not allowed to bow down to a shindalit. And therefore, since it's nighttime, how did Yoshua have the right to bow down? He didn't know if this was a regular guy or a shindalit. So Gemara says, no. Shani has number like Kiani Tzar Hashem. If you look in the psukim over there, it says that the man said, what do you mean? I'm an angel of God, meaning I'm not a shindalit, I'm an actual malach of Hashem, and therefore it's okay. For the Gemara, I don't understand. Let's say he's a shindalit. Isn't that pretty much what the shindalit would say if he was going to try to trick you? Hey, who are you? I'm your friend. Let me in. What are you talking about? Maybe this guy's someone who's a dangerous guy. I can't tell who he is. Maybe he's a shindalit. For the Gemara, but Dilma Meshakre. Maybe he lies. He says no. Gemiri, we have our shindalits, our demons are not that bad. We know they're not going to lie. Why? Gemiri delay mafki shem shemaim levatala. Since he said he's a sar tzva Hashem. He said Hashem. If he said Hashem, it must mean he really is a malach, because our shindalits do not say Hashem's name levatala, and therefore, because again, even a shindalit is ultimately a shliach of Hashem, they're not going to be mevatel shem Hashem, and they're not going to be moitzi shem Hashem levatala. Therefore, Yoshua was allowed to do it. Okay, well, Lamaisa, what did this Malach Hashem say to Yoshua? Amrullah, he said to him, Emesh yesterday, meaning earlier today in the afternoon, when you should have been bringing the carbon Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim, you did not bring it. And not only that, but now here you are encamped, ready to battle tomorrow morning. You have plenty of time to sit here and learn Torah. You're not teaching Torah, you're not learning Torah. Amr Lai, and Yeshua said back to him, on which of the two things you just gave me musar on are you really here about? Because you mentioned two things. What caused you to come? Amr Lai, atabasi, meaning what? I came now. Taisus over here says, ata is a remez to the pasuk of ata kisvu lechem es ashira hazais. Now you shall write for a shira, yeah. Ata kisvu meaning he's referencing Torah. Ata basi meaning I came right now. I'm coming for the thing you just did, which is that you're not learning Torah. And miyad, therefore miyad. Now again, it doesn't really mean miyad because this is by the battle of Yericho. Miyad here means the very next battle, the battle of Ai, right? Which really didn't turn out so good for us. But it said over there miyad, and that battle Vayilan Yoshua Balaylahahu Besocha Emek. He lied down that night in the depths of the valley, where we say from there a drasha. Amr Reb Yochanan Melamed. So this is the finishing of the question. So we see that Yeshua in the next battle learned Torah. But what was effectively the conversation with the Malach? The Malach said, like I said before, why aren't you learning Torah? Is that the reason why you came? That's the reason why I came. Therefore, what do you see? You see that the reason why he came was the fact that he wasn't learning Torah, not the fact that he wasn't bringing the carbon tamid. And he says emphatically, you see that Talmud Torah is clearly more important than bringing the tamid. How do I know this? From the pasuk we just brought. Shenemar atabasi. From the fact that this Malach Hashem said to Yoshua that he's coming specifically because of the fact that he wasn't learning Torah. So therefore, how can you tell me you're going to learn a Kal V'chaimer, that you're going to be what? Not Lane Megilla. Sorry, you're going to Lane Megillah despite being Mevatel Torah as a Kal V'chaimer from Avoda. You have no right to say such a Kal V'chaimer. The Gemara answers like kosher, not shver. Why? When had the Rabbim v'had the Yachim, meaning when do we say that Talmud Torah is going to be doche? When do we say that Talmud Torah, is more important than Avodah? That's specifically Talmud Torah the Rabbim. When Yehoshua was supposed to be teaching Torah, he was going to be teaching Torah to the entire nation. So that Torah is certainly more important than, let's say, a carbon, even a carbon shel tamid. Torah the Rabbim is the highest level, but a Torah the Yachid, a person who's sitting and learning in Beis Medrash, is going to get up and go lane Megillah. We're saying he shouldn't because Talmud Torah is adif. No, his Torah when he's learning on his own is not adif, and therefore he has a chiyuv to get up and go lane Megillah. For the Gemara, 1 second, the Yachid Kal. The Gemara now goes the other way. It says, "You're telling me the learning of Torah by a Yachid is not a big deal. I'll prove to you that it is." For Hatzanan, just a little bit of Hakdama here. We're going to be talking here about halacha is being be'avelus on Yontiv is also, being be'avelus on Shabbos is also. What about Chol HaMoed? What about Purim? What about Chanukah? So there, the laws of avelus, the laws of Hesped are a little bit lighter, although they are still in place. So here we're going to say like this: Nashim b'mayed ma'anis. Women during Chol HaMoed are allowed to say Hesped. They're allowed to speak words of Hesped. However, avaloi metapches, they can't go overboard. They can't shake their hands. They can't touch their face. They can't do actions that look like they're beating themselves up. There's a limit to how much eulogizing and avelus they can allow themselves to be in. Rabbi Shmuel Amar, im hayu smuchos lemita. However, if they're close to the aron, if they're close to where the dead body is lying, then betapchos, they can even do that little bit higher level of eulogizing. However, that's it. You can't then go do any more than that. Rosh Chodashim v'Chanukah b'Purim. However, on Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah and Purim, which have a lighter restriction around being ba'avelus, there we say not only ma'anos u'metapchos, you don't need to be next to the body. It can even be done when you are away from the body. Now, b'zeh u'b'zeh, right? Meaning whether we're talking about Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, or we're talking about Chol HaMoed, loy, they take out the avel here, loy mekaynanos, you cannot do a higher level of eulogizing. It's basically talking about a difference of whether when they would eulogize, they would just say it versus saying it, back and forth, where one person would say it, then everyone would repeat after her. So the point basically is, what do you see over here? The following, and this is the question, that although we're telling you the halacha here is you should not eulogize on Chol HaMoed in certain circumstances, if the person you're eulogizing is a Talmud Chacham, then all bets are off. You can eulogize for a Talmud Chacham. Kol shekain Chanukah Purim, certainly then on Chanukah Purim. Now, what's the question? The question over here, if you take a look at Taisus, Kol shekain Chanukah Purim, Taisus is very simple. What are we telling you to do? We're telling you that you're allowed to do Hesped for a Talmud Chacham, even what we'd be saying is on Purim, even if it means you're not going to lay Megillah that day. Now, why is it? L'chura, the only reason is because this person is a Talmud Chacham who's learned Torah. So what do you see? You see the Talmud Torah of this person is Docha Mikra Megillah. Because what am I doing? I'm honoring him by eulogizing him, And his Torah is the only distinct. What's the difference between him and some regular guy? The Torah that he learns. So you see from here that Torah is Doche Megillah. So what are you telling me this whole business that you learn out from a Kal V'Chaymer that we're Mevatel Megillah for Avodah Kol Shekain Torah? You see over here clearly that that's not the case. Gemara answers, what do you mean? Kavod Torah Ka'amris, you're bringing me a raya from Kavod HaTorah? Kavod HaTorah and Limud HaTorah are two different things. Kavod HaTorah is an even higher madrega, which is a Peladic thing if you think about it. Right? Meaning the whole reason why you're being Mechabed someone is because he learns. But while he's learning, you got to tell him to go learn Megillah. Right? Once he's finished learning and now he's dead, now the time comes, you have to be Mechabed him even to the point where you're going to lose out on Megillah. Unbelievable. Either way, ask the Gemara, Kavod Torah Ka'amris, Kavod Torah the Yachid Chamer. That's the answer of the Gemara. And L'chura from here we see two basic halachas. Long way to say it, but basically, Mikra Megillah is doche. Meaning, when I say doche, because I know Sprach is important, Megillah pushes Torah and Megillah pushes carbon. If a person is stuck and he can only bring a carbon or go hear Megillah Esther, he's got to go hear Megillah Esther. If a person can sit and learn Torah, but if he does, he's going to lose out on his ability to hear Mikra Megillah. He's got to close the Gemara, go to shul, or hopefully he's learning in shul, and hear Megillah.
But if he's learning with, say, like a minion, 10 guys here.
So Rabbim here is very clear. We don't mean Rovam Hadras Melech. What we mean over here is Yoshua was going to be teaching Torah to the entire nation. So yes, Enochanami, if we'd be talking about a scenario, theoretically speaking, where the entire Klal Yisrael is sitting and the Gedolim are teaching them, that could, theoretically speaking, in such a situation, maybe, perhaps be. And I'm saying that there wouldn't be such a scenario. There wouldn't be such a scenario. What's that?
Yeah, I said they didn't have Zoom.
No. And even if they had to, it wouldn't be again. I mean, Allah, I ask your local Orthodox rabbi, but certainly that would not be the case. What we're learning from there is that you see that clearly the learning of Torah does not rise to the level of a tzorech that we're going to push off Megillah Esther. And by the way, this is the halacha in general, that whenever a person has a mitzvah that he has begufay, he has no heter to do anything outside of certain very specific situations. A person's mevatel Torah to shekalula, he's mevatel Torah to hear Megillah, he's mevatel Torah to do almost any mitzvah really that's a mitzvah begufay. Continues the Gemara. Now, we have these two halachas, that Talmud Torah and Avodah are nisbatel, we push them aside in order to go hear Megillah. Amar Rava, pshita li Avodah u'mikra Megillah. Mikra Megillah Adis. Everyone agrees that if it's a question of between hearing Megillah or going and bringing carbon tamid, the halacha is we all have to go hear Megillah. How do we know that? Midr Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina from the Gemara before, who brought from Sukkim. What did it say? It said in the pasuk mishpacha, right? And therefore, we learned from there that all of the Kohanim and the Levium families have to put down their karbanos, put down their flutes, and go to hear Megillah Esther. Now, Talmud Torah Mikra Megillah. Mikra Megillah Adif. How do I know that Mikra Megillah is done in place of learning Torah? Mid the Samchu Shel Beis Rebbe, from the Kal V'Chaymer that Rebbe made, that if Avodah is going to be pushed off from Megillah, then certainly Torah is going to be pushed off from Megillah. So Talmud Torah Umeis Mitzvah, he's going to say now the following. He's extending the halach here. So Talmud Torah, learning Torah, Umeis Mitzvah, like we mentioned earlier, a person has a body and there's no one else to handle the body. What's the halacha? Meis Mitzvah Adif, everyone agrees. Meis Mitzvah is what you have to do. You close the Gemara, you go outside, and you deal with the body. How do I know this? With the Tanya, it's Meforsh Braisa. So therefore, that's the third halacha. So we know so far that Megillah is stronger than Torah and Avodah, and now we know that. What do you call it? That Torah is going to be pushed off from Meis Mitzvah. What about Avodah by Meis Mitzvah? Avodah Meis Mitzvah Adif. How do we know that from Mivala Achosa? Now you have to understand over here. The pasuk b'V'la'achos is talking about a nazir, right? A nazir is a person who has sworn off wine. The halacha is he's not allowed to be metame. He's not allowed to touch a mace, not allowed to be near a mace. Now the halacha is of a nazir, he's very similar to a kohen gadol. Whereas normally a kohen who's not allowed to be metame is allowed to be metame for the 7 krivim, right? Husband, wife, father, mother, son, daughter, and spouse. A kohen gadol is not even allowed to be metame for that, and so to a nazir is not allowed to do that. The Torah says that explicitly, and then it follows it up with another pasuk where it basically says he can't be tameh for his father, for his mother, for his sister, for his brother. One second. He can't be matame for his father, for his mother, for his sister, or his brother. Which that entire pasuk is completely extra. If you already told me he can't be matame for any of his krovim, what do you need to then go specify specifically which ones he can't be matame? So we understand from that extra pasuk must be coming to teach me that there are many scenarios where a person is allowed to be matame himself. You have to go. Yeah, okay. All right, we'll pause in a minute. Let's just finish over here, right? The Tanya, what does it mean when the Torah says we're talking here not about a nazir, we're talking about a regular Yisrael who has to shecht his carbon pesach. He's going to to bring a carbon pesach, or he's going to do milah on his son. And now he sees that he has one of his cravim that he has to go and he has to be matama himself for. So the question is, should he be matama himself or should he go do his carbon pesach? You can't do both. Once you become tummy, you can't bring a carbon pesach. You can't eat from your carbon pesach or be a tummy. So what is he supposed to do? So I would think yachol yitma. I would think that he has a chiyuv to go ahead and be oisik in the mace. So Amris, therefore it says in the Torah, lo yitma, to teach me that he doesn't. Meaning what? What do you see? That in the place of doing a carbon, we say better to bring a carbon pesach rather than go do the chiyuv to deal with the mace. However, that's only by a regular mace.
Both of these have kares. Both
Yes, both of the mitzvahs essay are, if you're mevatel mitzvahs, this is a chiyuv kares, correct. However, yachol keshem she'ena mitama la'achoso kacheina mitama la'mace mitzvah. So you might think that just like the halacha is that he should not be tamei and rather go do his carbon pesach, that would be the same if the mace is not his brother, but rather a mace mitzvah that no one else could do. That can't be. Talmud leimer ula'achoso la'achosu deina mitma aval mitma la'mace mitzvah. Only when it's a regular mace is he not matama, but if it's a mace mitzvah, he is matama. So what do you see from here? You see that Rav is basically saying 4 halachas. You have Mikra Megilla is doche Torah and avoda, and mace mitzvah is doche Torah and avoda. Now Rav is asking, boy Rava, Mikra Megilla, mace mitzvah, heminayu adif. In the championship game between Mikra Megilla, Mikra Megillah and Mace Mitzvah, which one happens? Meaning, if a person has to choose between burying a Mace Mitzvah or going and hearing Megillah, what does he do? Gemara says, Mikra Megillah Adif Mishum Pirsume Nisa. I think it's just. And then comments not muted. Okay. Heminayu Adif, Mikra Megillah Adif Mishum Pirsume Nisa. Do we say that Megillah is Docha Mace Mitzvah? Why? Because Megillah is about Pirsume Nisa. Or is it that Mace Mitzvah is more important because of Kavod Abrius? And Basar de Boy Hadar Pashta. Once he asked this question, he then went ahead and answered it that what Mace Mitzvah. The Aveira of Leisucha Lehisalim. Right? The halacha is if there's an Aveda, if there's something, someone lost something and you find it. So the halacha is you're not allowed to ignore that mitzvah. You have to actually go take care of it and bring it to the person who lost it, or at least announce it. However, what if the person who found it is a Talmud Chacham, and it's not lefi choydai to go have to be osik in it. In whatever capacity, it would be beneath the kavod hatayra for him to have to be osik in it. The halacha is that he doesn't have to do it. So you see that kavod brios is doche a lav in the Torah, and if that's the case, it must be therefore that if I have to choose between going and hearing Megillah or being Isaac in a Mace Mitzvah, I'll be Isaac in a Mace Mitzvah. Well, hold here. I just want to say one quick thing that I think is a very interesting idea, which is that the Gemara was asking about Talmud Torah and Megillah. So now, Lamaisa, it's a little bit funny, the lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara said, Talmud Torah, he doesn't go out to learn Torah, right? Which is a little bit of an interesting lashon because the pashtus is that it's a halacha not just by Mikra Megillah. Avada we're mevatel Talmud Torah. So the Mefarshim over here explain that maybe what it means is we're not talking about Talmud Torah versus Mikra Megillah. What we're talking about here is the Rov Am Hadras Melech of Megillah. Avada Megillah is doche Talmud Torah. But the question over here is why can't they just take a Megillah out in shul, wherever they're learning, and lay the Megillah there? The Chiddush L'chura, according to these Mefarshim, would be, the Gemara was bothered, or Gemara is asking, do we say that a person who can hear Megillah with a smaller group of people, right, but in order to do that would not have to be Mevatel Torah, or do we say that they can close their Gemara, get up, take a walk to a bigger shul where there'll be more people, and in that process be Mevatel Torah in order to hear Berov Am Hadras Melech? That's the pshat in the Gemara. And it's a little bit meduyik like that in our Gemara now, because when the Gemara finally gets to the big question of Megillah versus Mace Mitzvah, the way it expresses the question is, do we say that Megillah is Adif? Why? Because of Persume Nisa. Is that really a reason to be Mevatel Torah just because the mitzvah you're doing has the Persume Nisa? I mean, is this also a Hanukkah question because of Persume Nisa? Elamai, must be the question was that by going from where you currently can hear the Megillah to a bigger shul where there would be more people, do we say that the Pirsum Hanes of the mitzvah being done by Rov Hadras Melech, that's enough to be Mevatel Torah? So therefore, that's how they explain the Gemara, and it'll come out that we're saying that even that mitzvah of doing it by Rov Hadras Melech is Docha Talmud Torah. Either way, okay, shkoi.
Sorry, I was so distracted this morning. It's crazy.